You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Sons of the Shoe. We are back. We are ready to talk about Ohio State, Wisconsin, all this Michigan nonsense. You guys can follow the show on our Twitter handles, as you see there, at Nick Wilson Says, at Spencito. Please be sure we are a new podcast. Please follow, rate, and, of course, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Spencer, how the hell you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, Nick. Can't complain, man. Still reeling. Not reeling. That's the wrong word. That's a completely wrong word. Still, feeling good about the win on Saturday, but certainly wrapped up in a lot of this Michigan cheating scandal and ready for another week of college football that awaits us on the weekend.
I know we got to preview the Wisconsin game, which feels anticlimactic, even though they are 5-2 and technically the leader in the Big Ten West right now. But you mentioned it, the Michigan stuff. And if we just set up the details of this Michigan scandal, this sign stealing scandal, just setting up the details as of right now would be its own 1-hour podcast. But the highlights are here is that Michigan has this GA, Connor Stallions, who has been connected to and accused of sign stealing, including paying under his own name for multiple airline tickets to future Big Ten opponents and potential playoff opponents for Michigan over the last couple of years. They have proof of that. And they also have photographic evidence from stadium security of him in the building. So that's where we start. And again, just to reset for the sign stealing side of things.
Those damn AI facial recognition scanners, they get you every time.
How do we know that AI wasn't lying? You never know. I mean, AI could just be an Ohio State fan at this point. But there's an important distinction to make here as we start this conversation. Sign stealing in and of itself is a time-honored tradition in college football.
All sports.
In all sports, that's right. Sometimes it wins you World Series. And in this case, what's at stake was whether this person did in-person scouting, which is illegal, and whether he used technology to help sign steal. And that seems to be what the NCAA is trying to prove. I did as best as I could to sum this up in a small amount of time, but I'm just curious, where do you lean with what you've seen so far out of the story?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, to your point, Nick, like it's a time-honored tradition across, I think, all sports, but in college football especially. I think my initial reaction was, I'm sure everybody's doing this. Not that excuses it necessarily, because I know that's always the thing people jump to. It's like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. Everybody's doing something like this in some capacity. It's like, yeah, that's probably true. But obviously, in the eyes of the NCAA, it's still breaking and violating a rule. So I can understand why they're going to try to do whatever it is that they can do with whatever amount of power they even still have left after NIL's now a thing to try to, I guess, enact some sort of punishment on Michigan here. But, yeah, I mean, it's to me, I'm less worried, Nick, about what this all means for like Michigan right now and vacating wins and what the punishment's going to be and the fact that they did this and just in general, because again, I think it is something that a lot of people are probably doing or a lot of teams are probably doing. I'm more so interested in what the aftermath of this is, because I've already been on the record saying, I think that Jim Harbaugh, he always drops the hints that he's ready to go on to the NFL. And I think this year with what the cheeseburger situation, when he bought a couple of recruits cheeseburgers that got him suspended to start the season, and now this, I think this is all just kind of pointing to the writing being on the wall for Jim Harbaugh, where it's like he's just going to say, you know what, I'm done with the NCAA being up my ass about everything, and it's time for me to go back to the NFL and have success there.
I mean, Harbaugh does seem like a guy who constantly needs authority figure or villain to push back against. I think that's why San Francisco went poorly. I think that's why a lot of his stops as a head coach have not gone on as long as Michigan have. And here's the thing, like I don't know how you can prove that Jim Harbaugh had knowledge of this. And I think there's a big difference in the punishment between Harbaugh knowing and not knowing. You can still use the old dreaded lack of institutional control, But if you really wanted to make a case out of Jim Harbaugh, you have to prove that he knows. And honestly, I don't even know how significant this scandal, like is it going to be a game suspension? Like people are talking about vacating wins. They're talking about end of times for Michigan. And we actually have a little audio to play that I think kind of falls in line with this. I'll be honest with you. I think the whole thing's ridiculous. I do think Connor Stallions is really bad at cheating. If everything that has come out, like there's a Venmo payment to a coaching assistant the day before the Ohio State Georgia playoff game, and under the like reason for it just says GA. Like that's just stupid. Like this is like a bad villain in like a Die Hard movie of like, aren't you supposed to be more badass than this? Your name is Connor Stallions, for Christ's sake. Like you sound like a horse of a man, and instead you look a bit like a jackass. Like I'm a little disappointed in Connor Stallions. Like do better if you're going to cheat. And two, I do think, like, I'll be honest with you, and I have no foreknowledge of anything. It's going to make me sound like I'm implicating somebody. I'll tell you right now, having had discussions with a fair amount of people when I was in Charlotte around major programs, guys skirt these lines all the time. Oh, this is so, and I'm like, I know sign stealing is rampant, but in terms of all that other stuff, all that Spygate, the Belichick stuff, teams, major programs do this. They don't need to, by the way. Here's what's infuriating me. One, I think Ohio State's behind at least part of this story, which I think looks so bad. Like, guys, whether they're cheating or not, whether you're cheating or not, or the definition of cheating, all this crap. Like, to me, this is what a loser school does. This is what Indiana does because you can't beat Michigan. This is what Purdue does. This is what Maryland does. Well, Maryland's okay. Rutgers does. This is not what Ohio State should do.
Well, Greg Schiano, there's that clip of Greg Schiano during the game. He did like his halftime interview, and he had the quote about like, yeah, you know, there's some just awful thing. He didn't say awful, but he was like, there's some shady things going on out there, and it's just really unfortunate, something like that. And now everyone's pointing to that and saying like, oh, he knew what was going on. He knew what was happening. So I guess I agree with you. Like, I'm sure Ohio State maybe had a hand in revealing all this, but I do think it seems like other Big Ten programs are picking up on it. But I do think too, like, yes, it's definitely rampant. It's probably going on in other programs. It is funny. We always talk, Nick, whether it's college football programs or other programs, here locally in Cleveland, we always talk about these different sports teams and franchises, like having these deep thoughts and everything's mapped out a certain way. And they have and sometimes when this type of stuff happens and you see how just bad they were at covering it up, it makes you realize that maybe we give sometimes these programs or these sports teams like way too much credit for trying to like plot these things out. Like we act like they're the smartest people ever, and they have this big old system, and they're going to skirt the rules, and they have this whole master plan when all these things get unveiled. And then it's really like, you know what? Maybe it was just, there was a people who were just being kind of stupid. Maybe it was just a bunch of stupid people doing stupid things, and they didn't really cover their tracks very well at all. So I think we sometimes give them too much credit.
This is another thing that I've learned covering the NFL. And there's like this American ideology, and I think it is mostly American, that if you're a billionaire, you must be smart. Or if you're a millionaire, you must be smarter than the average bear. And I understand why it is that way. Money is the way that we gauge things in this country. But I'm here to tell you, guys, they're just as dumb and fearful as we are. They are. They just don't have to worry about their car payment. Like everybody, we're all on the same level. We have different levels of concerns in whether we're going to get through the week or not. But like, yes, just because somebody is a billionaire, it does not mean they're actually brilliant or a mastermind. Some folks just get lucky. Same thing with millionaires. But I will say, and I want to double back on this. Like, yeah, you can say that. I can't. My partner, Dustin Fox, Afternoon Drive, loves Elon Musk. I'm not getting divorced over Elon Musk comments. But I will tell you, man, it bugs me to see Ohio State fans embrace this scandal full-throated and full-hearted. And they're doing it because bleep Michigan. And I get that, but I think at the end of the day, one, let's be honest here, guys, this is in some ways a witch hunt. And I hate having to, it sounds like I'm defending Jim Harbaugh. This could be the Michigan, the Ann Arbor, Sons of Ann Arbor podcast. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm simply saying the NCAA is lashing out at Jim Harbaugh. And that doesn't make, just because it's against Michigan, doesn't make it right. And here's the other thing. Sign stealing's not why Ohio State's lost the last 2 years. It's not. Why Ohio State has lost to Michigan the last 2 years. It's not. They've lost because the other team played the better brand of football, because the other team was more physical, because the other team has closed the talent gap. And this year, you're going into a Michigan game where they're the better team. They've got the better quarterback. They've got the better run game because of the guys they have on that offensive line. I think you might have the better defense, but again, we'll find that out in Ann Arbor. So to me, this is a giant distraction for Ohio State. Like, I don't give a damn. Guys, Michigan, the only way Michigan
about the
isn't—
whole state of Michigan?
Yeah, the whole state of Michigan. The only way Michigan isn't winning a title is if you stop them, not if the NCAA stops them.
Yeah.
And it's not going to help your chances against Michigan this year. As a matter of fact, it might only piss them off. And to try and add validity to this because, well, I don't like Michigan is horseshit. And somebody needs to say that. Like, quite frankly, guys, listen, even if this is happening—
we can say that on here because it's a podcast. It's not the radio. That's right.
Well, I don't know that I can say it here, but I am going to say it here because that's approximately what it is. And it just annoys me. It's just a distraction. And if you end up— here's my fear. There's a good chance you're going to play Michigan this year and lose. And if anybody falls back on sign stealing, it's laughable and it's loser mentality. You are Ohio friggin' State. Like, you are the big boy in this conference.
You have a million advantages for sure.
Like, come on. Let's act like the big boys. Let's not act like petty fanboys. This is what it is. And can we play the clip?
One sec, Nick. I did want to say one thing. You're right in that it definitely sounds like sour grapes. And, I think here's the distinction for me, though. If the team is going to sit there and use that as an excuse and let it be a distraction, and if they lose come, end of November, I forget the exact date this year, the game, but if they lose that game and they're looking back and say like, oh, well, we know what they're doing over there and that's why we lost. Yes, 100% losers mentality, sour grapes, all that. They should, to me, this is happening. Ohio State has to do their best to just play this thing down the middle and just say, hey, we're not commenting. We're not worrying about it. We're just taking care of, we got Wisconsin this week. That's what we're focused on. But I will say for the fans, yes, like it feels the same for the fans to say that and use that as an excuse too and be like, oh yeah, vacate the wins. Give us the 2 wins the last 2 years because they've been stealing signs against us and they cheated and all this different stuff. Yes, you're right. But, and if the shoe was on the other foot, we know that Ohio State fans would be saying the exact same thing Michigan fans are saying right now. But that's also the beauty of being a fan is you have the luxury of when it's not happening to your program, you get to look at the other people and judge them harshly and throw all this, mud at them and say, oh, they're not doing it the right way. Take their wins away. I can't fault the fans as much for wanting to sort of to lean into that a little bit because I do think that's part of sports and that's part of what makes it fun being fans is like when the other team's having being investigated by the NCAA, you get to kind of laugh at them. It's just kind of how it goes. It's par for the course.
Can I tell you though, the only thing that bugs me about that is like, again, I'll use the word loser mentality. Like it's weird to watch how high and mighty Ohio State fans, how all of us were when we kicked their ass for 20 years. And now that Michigan's won the last 2 years, and ever since the second half ass kicking by Michigan last year, like it's just been panic. It's just been running around and it's insecurity. And I just hate, like, to me, it's so weird. And this is not an Ohio State problem, just to be clear. This is a Michigan problem. It's a Clemson problem. It's a Florida State problem. It's Miami, Texas, USC, Alabama, Georgia. It's so weird to me when fan bases who are still very much on top, they're 7-0. It's a down year. They're 7-0. And all of a sudden you get insecure and it's like, no, you've still kicked their ass for the better parts of 20 years. And the reason why I made the mention of Ohio State, if you're in on this and if you're helping spearhead this cause or if you're part of the informant team, yeah, I think you have like that to me is a distraction. Nobody on that staff should be thinking anything of the next few games and how you beat Michigan. And tattling on Michigan, I have no interest. Do not care. Because at worst, it's not going to cost them a national championship. It's not going to cost them a spot in the playoffs. At worst, they'll have to either sit Jim Harbaugh, or here's the other thing. I'm not even sure Michigan's going to comply if the NCAA tries to punish them. The NCAA was trying to punish Jim Harbaugh with a 4-game suspension or more. And Jim Harbaugh was like, no, we're good. Well, you know what? I'll take a 3-game suspension against 3 teams I have no concern about. So, good luck. You found the one person who's just not going to pull in with your crap and is not going to, you know what? You're right. I'll sit out the playoffs this year to bow down to the NCAA. Jim Harbaugh is crazy. He is loco in la cabeza. He is not effing around. And he's not letting these jackasses in the NCAA in Indianapolis cost him his chance at what would be the ultimate walk-off moment. The ultimate walk-off moment is winning a national title and then go back to the NFL, likely to the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. And I think this actually leads nicely into the clip that we have from one of our shows on 92 Through the Fan here in Cleveland. Ken Carman and Anthony Lima were talking about this exact thing and sort of alluding to what you got to with, what should Michigan essentially get out in front of this and invoke their own punishment on Jim Harbaugh instead of letting the NCAA come in and do the dirty work and do it for them so that they can maybe still be able to set themselves up for that walk-off that you speak of trying to chase a national championship. Let's play this clip for you, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Jim Harbaugh will claim there's plausible deniability. He absolutely will.
Sure.
I don't understand how, in this situation, this is directly involved in your football games. This isn't Coach K with $5,000 in a Louis to some kid in 2017. This is directly involved to your game plans. You can't tell me there's no way you didn't know. Now, he's going to say it, and I'm going to say, yeah, I don't believe you. If I'm Michigan, I got to think about the future of my program because I think Jim Harbaugh is just going to go to Chicago.
Well, I think
he's just going to go to Chicago or anywhere else.
He tried to leave last year.
So what you do now?
I think he was going to leave anyway.
If you're Michigan, I suspend him now.
So you take matters in your own hands.
They already did something as a preemptive strike before, and I'd say, you know what? I have to protect what they've built. They've built something great. And if you're Michigan football, you do not want to go back into hell of where you were before. And I know they had one Sugar Bowl with Brady Hoke, but other than that, it was pure hell for what almost was 20 years until Jim Harbaugh finally got him to the other level. Now people are saying that wasn't even legitimate because of your sign stealing. You've already made a preemptive strike once. I say you do it again. Protect the future of your program because Jim Harbaugh is going to be gone. And he's going to leave with no repercussions because it's the NFL and you're going to be left holding whatever power against the NCAA has against you.
But devil's advocate, Kenny, look at what happened in Kansas. What did Kansas lose with they had mountains of evidence that they were using Adidas to steer players to Lawrence. They had them. They had them red-handed.
But
what happened in the end? Nothing happened.
You're getting players. It's one thing to get players, and you could say, hey, we got big men, and I don't know, we got boosters who really, really love our program, and I can't keep an eye on all of them. They're all adults, and I'm an adult, and I can't sit there and tell adults what to do with their money. And Bill Self can look you dead in the eye and say that and actually mean it and be truthful with it. Coach K could say the same thing. He doesn't know about any of that stuff because he don't want to know about any of that stuff. But when it comes to your game plans, hard for me to believe the head football coach don't know about these things.
Nick, I think it's an interesting question. It's an interesting, I guess, point from Ken on should they just kind of get out in front of it and invoke their own punishment on Jim Harbaugh like they did to start the season. And I see where they're coming from. Here's the thing for me. I don't know. The NCAA, I feel like, is so inconsistent with these punishments. I don't know what's in store. They could just say, hey, it's whatever. Everybody's doing this. We already got you earlier this year, so we're going to let this one go, or this one's not that big of a deal. I don't know off the top of my head, other instances where this type of infraction has happened and what they've done. Or they could be like, hey, 2 times in 1 year, we're coming and knocking on your door. guess what? Now we're definitely throwing the book at you. You're done. You're getting these wins vacated, which is wins vacated thing is like the most useless punishment of all time. Nobody cares. We all saw it happen. They tried to take Reggie Bush's Heisman, and we all went years and years still talking about how, hey, remember that year when Reggie Bush was the best player in college football history and he won the Heisman? Yeah, that was pretty cool. So yeah, like that means nothing to me. But I don't know what my biggest thing is, to Ken's point. I see where he's coming from, because if Michigan even has any inkling that they're going to get the book thrown at them, they probably should get out in front of it. But I still think at the end of all this, like the biggest thing I take away from all this is what it means for Jim Harbaugh's future, which they also alluded to on the clip there. I think he's gone no matter what. And maybe that's why you do get out in front of it, like Ken mentioned, because then you at least set yourself up to sort of be okay on the other side. Because if he's leaving anyway, he's going to leave you with nothing.
Yeah, here's what I'm going to say is it's a very valid fear for Michigan to be left holding the bag with Jim Harbaugh. But here's what the bag that they will be left holding will contain: potentially a national championship trophy. So the idea that a team with the Heisman favorite, with a team that I think absolutely looks like the best Michigan team that they've had, would preemptively suspend Jim Harbaugh in fear of some, I don't know, hammer dropping for the NCAA, which is a feckless organization. They have no balls. They have no balls left. They have no power left. You know why? Because they've been trying to hammer Bill Self to the wall for a decade. I mean, they just have dudes on record, and that's Lima brought this up. Like they've had the bag man be like, "Who paid you?" He did over there, the guy, that Bill Self guy, and here we are. They're still not able to drop the hammer, and that is way more anti-amateur athletics than sign stealing. This is a one-game suspension. And the idea that Michigan boosters should cower in fear of the almighty NCAA. Here's the thing. If let's say they follow this thing down the rabbit hole and there are suspensions meted out, you know when they're likely to be? Next year. And that's if anything happens. So why would you endanger the best year? This is the payoff. This is the payoff for the milk with steak. This is the payoff for the Ward Manual feud. This is a payoff for everything. Go win a national title.
And that's the problem with the NCAA too, Nick, is they're always very reactionary, and they don't like proactively respond to anything. It's always like, oh, well, we'll win. Like, so if they go out and win a national championship this season, and then they find like, say this goes even deeper, and there was like moles in different teams and all these, like, say they discovered all this like corruptness, right? They'll come out next year and be like, oh, we're vacating the national championship, instead of being like, hey, we should probably try to stop this beforehand. Then it's too late. Because like I said, vacating wins means nothing to me. We saw it happen.
They're also not going to vacate a national title.
True.
They're not going to do it. Like, this is the hardest that I think anyone's going to get hit. The Connor Stallions.
Because you lose all credibility if you do that. I mean,
no, they don't have credibility in the NCAA.
Well, but they don't. Whatever credibility they have left, like whatever you think of when you hear the NCAA, for a lot of people, like, oh yeah, they govern college sports. Like, you lose all that, there's nothing left for you. You really drain the lake on that if you just do something like that. Like, you can't vacate a national championship.
I don't know that they care. I just don't think they have the power. And I think they are on their last legs. I think this is personal with Harbaugh. And here's the thing. It didn't matter if it was Ohio State or Michigan. The allegations don't really bug me. I kind of laugh at them. And I think it's wasting time if you're an Ohio State fan bugging out over these or casting aspersions, because in the end, you're still going to play Michigan. And as of right now, they're still the better team. I still think Michigan has its best chance to win a national title since Lloyd Carr went away. I retired. So I don't think any of those things are going to change. Michigan's on the warpath to a potential national title. And I think it's a whole distraction. I honestly, you're right. You're right about the NCAA and, credibility. They don't care. And this is proving that they don't